Hi everyone, my name's Jo, and this right here is what we call the Davenport. I'm here on Thursdays where I read a story from the Bible, kind of filter through my own words and interpretations, and then just kind of chat about what I think the takeaways are. If you have similar goals and interests, I invite you to stick around. Last week, we talked a little bit about marriage. Today, we're going to kind of continue that discussion and talk about the first documented marital argument, otherwise known as the first sin. As always, seeking you will find. If you're looking for a reason to be obedient, you will find it. If you're looking for a reason to be disobedient, you will find it. So decide what your intention is right now, and let's get started. This is stressful. This is stressful talk. I didn't think it'd be so stressful to just talk to yourself on, about the Bible. But I find this really kind of stressful and, maybe overwhelming. Anyway, so I know last week we talked a lot about marriage and, the first marriage documented in Genesis and what that looked like. I wanted to at first lump both of these topics together because they go hand in hand. They are, quite literally back to back in the Bible. However, I thought in the end, I just thought it maybe be a little bit too much just for one session. So I broke them in half. Something I know I forgot that I wanted to mention last time is you will only attract someone that's as healthy as you are, right? So unhealthy will always attract unhealthy. Addiction will always attract addiction. Codependency will always attract codependency. Personality disorder will always attract personality disorder, right? So there's no such thing as I'm this perfectly well person and I just attract all these crazy people. I hear that a lot. Like I'm like, oh, I attract all the crazy ones. You will only attract someone that's as healthy as you are. So the only way to attract a healthy spouse is to get yourself well, is to get yourself healthy, right? And I say this a lot because I have a background in behavioral health and psychology. The only way to get yourself well is that means you're doing the inner work, right? You're going to therapy, you're taking your meds, you're working on you're working on that childhood trauma, you're working on that healing, you're getting yourself well, you're surrounding yourself with other people that are well themselves too. You're getting in the word, you're seeking God. That's the only way that you get yourself well and that you will attract other people that are also well. Okay, great. So I think that's kind of what I wanted to start with today. I'm just going to pull out my notes. So today, we're just going to dive right in, continue with the story, and chat about the first documented marital argument, which was the first sin. So let's see. Let's do a little bit of review of where we were last time. We have Adam, who Eve is created. He meets Eve for the first time and he takes one look at her. He thinks she's the most beautiful, object in the world that he's ever seen. Of course, he's going to think that because there was only one other person in the world. So, this was probably just amazing to him. He takes one look at her. It's this whole like rom-com moment. There's a love ballad playing in the background. He's saying, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Every movement she makes is graceful and perfect, and every word she says is angelic. And he's just gazing on her like she is just just the best thing that's ever happened to him. And it's to be fair, it's the dopamine phase, right? It's the beginning stages of the relationship. We've all been there. So I think we all can relate to that feeling. So that's where we are. Remember, we're in Genesis. First 5 books of the Bible are the Pentateuch: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And what we had in the Genesis 1 and 2 was the painted picture of what relationship and intimacy with God side by side would look like, and what it would be like to be connected with God all the time, and to be able to and to just have God next to you and have that full just that full intimacy and that full connection with God in real time. Also, remember, we ended the chapter 2 with the man and the woman were together naked without shame, meaning they were fully known by each other. They were fully exposed by each other, and they weren't embarrassed or insecure in any way. They weren't embarrassed about themselves or ashamed of anything they'd done. They had no past that they were insecure about or embarrassed about. They'd never been rejected. They'd never been abandoned. They were fully known by each other. And this is the painted picture of what, intimacy with our spouse should look like, and also intimacy, ideally, of what intimacy with God looks like. However, we go into chapter 3 when all that changes. Genesis 3. Now the snake was the most cunning of all the wild animals that the Lord God had made. He asked the woman, "Did God really say, 'You shall not eat from any of the trees in the garden'?" The woman answered the snake, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden. It is only the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden that God said, 'You shall not eat it or even touch it, or else you will die.'" But the snake said to the woman, "You certainly will not die. God knows well that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like gods, who know good and evil." The woman saw that the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eyes, and the tree was desirable for gaining wisdom. So she took some of its fruit and ate it, and she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made loincloths for themselves. When they heard the sound of the Lord God walking about in the garden at the breezy time of the day, the man and his wife hid themselves from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. The Lord God then called to the man and asked him, "Where are you?" He answered, "I heard you in the garden, but I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." Then God asked, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I had forbidden you to eat?" The man replied, "The woman whom you put here with me, she gave me fruit from the tree, so I ate it." The Lord God then asked the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman answered, "The snake tricked me, so I ate it." Then the Lord God said to the snake, "Because you have done this, cursed are you among all the animals, tame or wild. On your belly you shall crawl, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. They will strike at your head while you strike at their heel." To the woman he said, "I will intensify your toil in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Yet your urge shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." To the man he said, "Because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you, you shall not eat from it." To the man he said, "Because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you, you shall not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you shall eat its yield all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bear for you, and you shall eat the grass of the field. By the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread, until you return to the ground from which you were taken. For you are dust, and to dust you shall return." The man gave his wife the name Eve because she was the mother of all living. The Lord God made for the man and his wife garments of skin with which he clothed them. Then the Lord God said, "See, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. Now what if he also reaches out his hand to take fruit from the tree of life and eats of it and lives forever?" The Lord God therefore banished him from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from which he had been taken. He expelled the man, stationing the cherubim and the fiery revolving sword east of the Garden of Eden to guard the way to the tree of life. All right, so let's stop and chat about what we just read. Okay, so I mentioned before we have Adam and Eve who, just met each other, and it's this whole romantic moment where they meet each other and they're all in this loopy, lovey phase. And one day, I don't know how long this has happened from when Eve was created. It doesn't say, but what have you. Eve is out walking, I guess. I don't know where Adam is. It doesn't say, but again, she's walking. He could be right next to her. next to her. He could be elsewhere. I don't know, but she's, walking. Snake comes up to her. Now, the snake says to her, did God really say, that you shouldn't eat from that? And I want to stop and unpack here, lean in, because this is where it gets good. Most English, I think actually every English translation of Genesis 3 will say the snake was, I've read like cunning, I've read tricky, I think I've read manipulative, like what's another? I've just read a lot of English translations will say that the snake was all these like, tricky or like bad traits. And I'm definitely not trying to defend the snake, and another conversation for another day when we talk about Satan and Lucifer. Some people believe that the snake was, just a snake. And some people believe that Lucifer or Satan had embodied the snake in this moment to talk to Eve. So whatever, well, that's another story for another day. But the point I'm trying to make is that many English translations will change. The Hebrew word that describes the snake in this verse is arum. Many English translations will say arum means crafty, manipulative, tricky, all those kinds of words. You know what arum means in English? Sensible. It means sensible. That takes away the weight, doesn't it? That really does take the shift off of the snake when you think about it, because it's not even, and sure, it's fair to say that there is, probably some manipulative, there's some manipulative root behind it, but the snake didn't even say anything tricky to Eve. The snake just said, "Oh, did God say that? Did God really say that you can't do that? That doesn't make sense. If God is who He says He is, then that doesn't make sense. If God is who He says He is, then why would that be like that? If God is who He says He is, then why did He do that and not do that? And why did that happen and not that happen? That doesn't make sense." That's all that the snake said to Eve, is it doesn't make sense. You're going to get those thoughts. You're going to get those people that come into your life that say, if that doesn't make sense, because if God is who He says He is, and if it's one way, that doesn't make sense. How could it be that way? That's what's going on in this exchange. You have to be prepared for what you're going to say in that exchange. Eve was not prepared. This is the big takeaway that we have from this verse, is that the snake caught Eve in a moment when she was unguarded, when she had let her guard down and maybe wasn't walking side by side with God, wasn't in communication with God, maybe was taking God's presence or communication for granted, was just out kind of doing her own thing and just let her guard down. And that's when the snake was looking for the opportunity to go up to her and say, that doesn't make sense. Make it make sense. And Eve didn't even give any like rebuttal. I mean, this snake was like, "Oh, well, if God is who He says He is, I mean, that doesn't really make any sense, does it?" And Eve is just like, "Oh yeah, huh? Okay," and just like takes the fruit and takes a bite. That's all it took, is just to say, it doesn't make sense, so it obviously can't be true. And Eve just bought into it. You have to be prepared for what you're going to say. You have to know why you believe what you believe, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense, because it's not supposed to make sense to you. Someday, when we are able to sit down and have these conversations with God, someday in heaven, when we can chat about all those things, we can say, this thing that happened and this thing that didn't happen and this thing that went the way I didn't want it to go. What was up with all that? Because that didn't make sense to me. And maybe it will make sense at that time. That's obviously for us to find out when that day comes. But for now, it doesn't have to make sense. It's not going to make sense. It's really not supposed to make sense. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that this is all going to make sense to you, or that you should believe it because it makes sense. It's we believe it and we obey it because of who God is, because of who we have confidence in who God is and who we have knowing in our heart and in our soul of who God is. So the snake comes up to Eve and says, listen to me, that doesn't make sense. Why would God put a tree in front of you and say you can't eat from it? That if God didn't want you to do that, then why would he be giving you the opportunity? Listen to me, not every open door is an opportunity. Sometimes it's a temptation. Okay. Sometimes it's an opportunity for you to show God that you can be trusted and that you're ready for the next level. Sometimes it's a chance. Sometimes it's an exercise in self-control. Not every open door is an opportunity. Sometimes it's a temptation. So takes the fruit, eats it. This is important. The specific wording here, it doesn't say that she gives it to Adam and he eats it. It doesn't say she gives it to the man and eats it. It says she gives it to her husband and he eats it. That shows the weight. We talked about this last time. That shows the weight of the relationship between husband and wife, but the pull that the wife has on the husband. If you are a wife, or if you plan on being a wife someday, you have the opportunity to gauge the barometer of the house. You have the opportunity to say what comes into this home, what I allow in this home, how I protect this home, how I guard this home. You have the opportunity to decide what comes up to your husband, and every word you say and every action you do will determine whether it's uplifting for your husband or tearing him down. She does not hand the man the fruit or Adam the fruit. She hands her husband the fruit. And that specific wording shows the weight in the relationship between a wife and her husband. Now, I don't know what she said to him, and I don't even know if he asked any questions about where'd you get this fruit. To be fair, I could hand my husband literally anything while I'm standing there naked and tell him to eat it, and it wouldn't be a hard sell. So I'm just, that was, I don't have any doubts that, I don't think that she had to do much persuading, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, so Adam takes the fruit, eats it, and then in one moment, just like that, we're in separation from God and everything's different. Not only are we in separation from God, but we're in separation from each other. Husband and wife go from being like side by side, yoked next to each other, to now facing each other and butting heads against each other. And I'll show you where that comes up. All right, so Adam takes the fruit. Now they both ate it. Then God asks one question and Adam just word vomits. I don't know if you have a teenager or if you've ever been around teenagers, or maybe when you were a teenager, this is what it's like. But this interaction between Adam and God really makes me think of like the parent-teenager thing, because God asks one question and says, "Where are you?" And Adam just word vomits all over because he's so freaked out, because he's so stressed in this moment. If, the parent says, "Where are you?" the answer in theory would be something like, "Oh, I'm at the gym." It'd be a place, right? That's what I'm trying to say. I'm at the gym. I'm at work. I'm at home. I'm at the grocery store, whatever. It would be a place. In theory, where are you? The answer would be a place. But listen to me. God says, "Where are you?" And Adam responds with, "I'm naked." I don't know a lot about parenting, but if you call your teenager and say, "Where are you?" and their response is, "I'm naked," something has gone very wrong. Okay. So, yeah, that is my parenting tip of the day. Stay tuned for more. And then God says, "Where are you?" Adam says, "I'm naked." Adam says, whoa, back up. Who told you were naked? That I didn't even naked. How did this even come about? Remember, nakedness means to be fully known and fully exposed without being insecure or embarrassed or ashamed or feeling guilt or regret or abandoned or rejected or any of those feelings. To feel naked in these chapters is to be fully known and fully exposed without anything to hide. So pretty much, God says, "Where are you?" Adam says, "I'm naked." In other words, Adam said, "I knew I had something to hide, so I ran." And then God says, whoa, 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 who told you were naked? Every time Adam opens up his mouth, he just keeps like incriminating himself. It's like, Adam, read the room. Just stop talking. Okay. And then God says, did you eat the fruit? I told you not to. And here's where the first fight happens. Again, this is a yes or no question. Did you eat the fruit? Yes or no? Adam's response is, the woman you gave me the fruit. It sounds like a her problem, right? I was just minding my own business and doing everything. I was out chilling working in the garden. Remember the assignment you gave me? I'm the obedient worker. I was in the garden, doing my own thing. I don't have anything to do with this. And she just handed me this fruit. I mean, it sounds like a problem between you and her is what I'm trying to say. It sounds like a her thing. And I can just imagine Eve in this moment. Like, really? Oh, okay. Well, yeah, 5 minutes ago, I was the most beautiful thing you'd ever seen, and I was the most amazing thing that had ever happened to you, and everything I say and do is angelic and perfect, and now I'm the problem. Okay, great. So I guess we're out of the dopamine phase. That went fast. So we had this, we had this like real romantic start in the beginning, and now all of a sudden, the very first chance that Adam gets to throw her under the bus, he takes it. And I don't even think it's because he was mad at her or because he felt like he resented her in that moment or wanted her gone or wanted her out of the picture. It was just coming from a place of I just wanted to cover my own butt, right? I just wanted to make sure I looked better than you. I just wanted to make sure that I could do, and I said and did whatever I had to make sure that I don't look like the problem in this story. Because as long as the person next to me looks worse, I will always by default look comparatively better. This is actually, there are a lot of parallels in the Old and the New Testament. This is also a parallel in the story in the New Testament with Jesus and Barabbas. In a few weeks, when we get to Easter, we will talk about Barabbas. So bookmark that. We're going to come back to it. But this is the parallel here in what's going on. As long as I can look better than the person next to me, I won't be at fault, or I won't have to take all the blame or the guilt, or I won't have to feel ashamed, or I won't have to feel like I'm the problem, or I won't have to feel like I have something to hide, because this is that first moment where nakedness, being aware of your nakedness is being aware of something that we need to hide and that we need to be ashamed of or insecure about or regret. So in this first moment, Adam takes the first chance and says, it sounds like a her problem. So, why don't you go chat with her, and I'm just going to go back to doing my work because, I'm the diligent employee. So yeah, he says it sounds like her problem. Eve probably looks at him like, oh, really? Okay, well, great. I see where we stand now. I see that the beginning stages are over. So now Eve shifts the blame to the snake, who is probably like out just like doing its own thing by this time and making popcorn and just trying to enjoy the show. And Eve then again, Adam looks for someone to shift blame to, shifts it to Eve. Eve looks for someone to shift blame to. There weren't any other people on the planet right now, so Eve didn't have many other options. So she passes it on to the snake and says, well, it was only because he tricked me. It doesn't say the snake tricked me. It's literally saying the snake tried to tell me that doesn't make sense. And basically that's the excuse I'm using for why I did what I did kind of thing, which is a really terrible out if you're ever, like in court or something and you're pleading your innocence. Adam passing the blame onto Eve. In that moment, I mean, maybe they could have like had words back and forth in front of God, but the way I picture it is I think Eve probably just would have been so like blindsided that she just didn't even really say anything in that moment. But later that night, before bed, when they're pulling back the covers, those two had to have had words, right? Those two had to have just laid it down somehow, because I just picture Eve saying something like, hey, back there, what was that? What was going on there? What was that? Why were you so quick to step on me and to make me the problem? What's going on there? I don't know if, this is relatable at all, but when you have a fight with your spouse, even after you apologize and you've kind of, brushed it aside or whatever, moved on with your day, there's still that like heavy weight in the air. There's still that like uncomfortableness in the air between you. And I don't know if this is going to make sense, but I know like if my husband and I have a fight, not even a fight, maybe just like a uncomfortable exchange, I guess we'll call it that. Later that night in bed, we'll be like inches apart on the mattress, but it feels like miles apart. It just feels like there's an ocean between us. And like, I'll just want to like reach across the bed and like grab onto him. But there's also that part of me that's like, oh, but then I don't want to, I don't want to admit that I'm wrong, and I don't want to take the blame and, it was your fault or that kind of thing. That's what I picture this exchange being like between Adam and Eve, that night as they're getting ready for bed. There's like that uncomfortable weight between them. There's that uncomfortable air between them, that this is the first time that they're having to sort it out. And this is the first time that they're having to navigate it. So not only are they feeling ashamed before God about what they did that day, they're feeling ashamed of themselves. They're, they're for the first time feeling like aware of their bodies, or I don't know if ashamed to be the right way, but maybe like insecure about their bodies or embarrassed of their bodies. And now this is the first time that they're feeling in separation with each other. And being in separation with your spouse is so draining. It makes the days so much more difficult. It's like it makes the days go by so slower, and everything is so much more difficult because that's not the way it's supposed to be, right? We're supposed to be not like this with our spouse, but we're supposed to be like yoked together, moving in the same direction towards the same goal, moving towards God together. Remember we talked about last time, the purpose of marriage is to serve God by serving someone else. It's a full-time ministry, right? Also, what I think is worth pointing out here, most of the time we read that the majority of marital conflict comes from three things: disagreements on parenting, disagreements on money, disagreements on definition of adultery. None of those three elements were present here, right? That just goes to show that, I mean, yes, of course, those three topics are very important, and we absolutely want to make sure that we can be on the same page with those things when possible. Another conversation for another day. However, that just goes to show how much about arguing isn't really about that argument. It's just about, I want to make sure I don't look like the problem. I want to make sure I look like I'm right. And the flesh is so heavy. The flesh weighs on you. We make it look like our spouse is a problem when we're not. That's how we feel better about ourselves in front of God. And the weight of flesh is just so heavy. It just weighs on you. I think it's also really telling that this is the first time that they're wearing fur. They're wearing animal flesh. And it was, in theory, the first time they were wearing their flesh, right? Spiritually speaking, it's the first time that they're putting on the weight of their flesh and their selfishness, and physically they were putting on animal flesh to wear for the first time. That was the first marital argument and the first sin. So what are our takeaways from this? One is, don't pick a fight with your spouse when you're hungry. So I'm kidding, but I'm not. Don't pick a fight with your spouse when you're spiritually hungry, when you haven't gone to God first on how you should discuss something or bring something up. For me, I know it's different for everybody, but for me, I have a rule. I won't air a grievance with my husband when I'm tired, because if I can't sleep, I don't know what it is about insomnia, but I just get those wheels turning, and I will just think of something that he said or did 6 months ago, and I'm just ready to lay it down. I am just ready to bring it up. I don't care if it's 3 a.m. I will shake him awake, unguarded, just completely like enjoying his life, probably dreaming, enjoying his, peaceful sleep. And I will just shake him awake and be like, let's discuss this. This is important. But so yeah, there have been a couple times that I've done that. And now I've just said, I will not air a grievance with my husband when I'm tired. I will absolutely, I promise myself, I'll let myself, I have to sleep on it in the morning the next day. Then I can find a time to talk about it with him. But that's for me anyway, is that I won't air grievance with my husband. For some people, it's I won't air a grievance with my spouse when I'm hungry, or I won't air a grievance with my spouse when I'm overwhelmed at work. And of course, there are some things that come up in that moment and they have to be discussed. But I'm talking about the moments when you're like in your own head and the wheels are turning and you're just thinking of something that you just want to argue about. just for the sake of it. just to force that person into my camp. I just want to be right. I just want to be the one that's right. However, the goal of marriage is not to be right. The goal of marriage is to be one. The goal of marriage is not to turn your spouse into a clone of you who thinks like you and wants all the same things you do and has all the same goals that you do and wants to have the temperature in the house the same as you do and fold the towels the same as you do and decorate the house the same as you do and parent the same way and view money the same way you do and view retirement and all that. The goal of marriage is not to make your spouse a clone of you, but to make you a clone of Christ, to make you more Christ-like. So let's see, what else are the takeaways? The next time that you feel compelled to snap at your partner or say something passive-aggressive or belittling, just ask first, if you can. I know it's easier said than done, but just ask first, am I feeling insecure in any way, right? Am I feeling at all like I feel like don't trust my partner or that they don't have my back? Because that lack of trust is often the source of marital arguments, marital disagreements. This story would have gone much differently if they hadn't turned on each other. The sin would have happened either way, but the answer was not about whose fault it was. It's about we're in this together. We got off track together. We're going to figure it out together. We're going to get back on board together. It's not, we wouldn't be here if you hadn't have done this and said this and that. That's what the enemy wants, right? If the goal of marriage is to become more like Christ, the enemy, the devil, is going to do everything and say everything that he can to make sure you become less and less and less like Christ, to turn against your spouse in every way. Remember, if the goal of marriage is to become more like Christ and serve God by serving someone else, the devil's goal is to get you to only serve yourself. Last thing before we stop is I want to circle back about the word sensible again. Remember, English translations will say that the enemy in this verse was the serpent was tricky or manipulative, sneaky. The word is sensible. The word is all that was going on is that the enemy, the serpent, was trying to get Eve to think if it doesn't make sense, it cannot be true. And that was the basis of getting her to fall or getting her to sin or getting her to capitalize on anything that she thought was an opportunity. But remember, not just because it's in front of you doesn't mean it's for you. Just because it's in front of you doesn't mean it's an opportunity and an open door. Sometimes it's a temptation. Sometimes it's for someone else and it's not even for you. Sometimes it's an exercise in self-control. Sometimes it's a test to show God that you can be trusted and that you're ready for that next level. Whatever it was in this case, it could have been either of those things, but Eve was not prepared. You need to armor yourself up. We hear all the time. I hear all the time. I wasn't trying to be disobedient. I wasn't trying to start an affair. I wasn't looking for an addiction. But what were you doing to armor yourself away from it, right? You have to be armored up. everywhere you go, all the time. You have to be armored up, that you're protecting yourself from addiction, that you're protecting yourself from adultery, that you're protecting yourself from sinful behavior and sinful thoughts and being disobedient. You are going to have someone come into your life, or you're going to have those thoughts come in that say, if it doesn't make sense, it cannot be true. It's not always going to make sense. And you need to make peace with that. You need to make peace with, I do not understand this, and that's okay. I'm not supposed to understand. It's not my job to understand. It's my job to trust. It is not your job to understand what God's doing. It's your job to trust it and obey. And that is really the majority of the Old Testament summed up in like 10 words. So you're welcome. I think that's all that I had to chat about. So thank you so much for sharing your time and your space with me today. I really enjoyed this chat. I hope that you found it, somewhat interesting or relevant or helpful. And if so, then I hope you will consider joining me next time. Thank you.